Weiser-Künstler, this tiny, just over 4-hectare estate, run by the husband and wife team of Konstantin Weiser and Alexandra Künstler, is based in Traben-Trarbach, an important village right on the edge of the Middle Mosel. We devoted fans of Weiser-Künstler often refer to the estate as a Vaiku, and there are plenty of seriously devoted fans, many of them in fact other winemakers. Konstantin and Alexandra are the consummate winemakers. They farm certified organic in some of the steepest and most demanding sites. There are simply no compromises here, and you can taste it. But let's look at their sites. As this general area is lesser known and filled with quirky and fascinating side valleys, a quick overview is warranted. We'll begin in the famous Middle Mosel in what we call the Hollywood Mile, which for us begins with the village of Bernkastel and runs through Groch, Velen, Zeltingen, finally ending with 2 villages on the river's bend, Urzig and Erden. Now when we pull back from here, gaining some altitude and looking down, we see Vaiku and their home village of Traben-Trarbach only a little bit downstream from Erden, and directly after the Mosel does a little kick turn right by the village of Wolf. Weiser-Künstler's little purple jewel box of an estate is directly in the village of Traben-Trarbach, right around the corner from the famous Hotel Bellevue, a classic example of Jugendstil architecture. From their estate in Traben-Trarbach, we'll first move upstream a bit to the village of Wolf, home also to Vollenweider's top sites, including the Goldgrube and the Steffensberg. While Vollenweider's 2 sites line the river, forming a dramatic amphitheater, Vaiku's Wolfer Sonnenallee is tucked into a side valley behind the village. You'd almost miss it if you didn't know where to look. Konstantin and Alexandra farm about half a hectare in this warmer site with its southern exposure and dramatic incline. The first vintage they made was 2015. The Sonnenallee is a drier site with 50-year-old vines on gray slate. A cool wind blows in from the forest to the east, and so the diurnal in the vineyard is quite dramatic, meaning the hot days are countered by quite cold evenings. For me, this is perhaps the most Middle Mosel of all their vineyards, which is to say it's a bit more fruity and round. The wines of Sonnenallee often do not have the aggressive acidities of some of the sites further downstream. Konstantin believes this to be a Cabernet vineyard par excellence, though I've been impressed with the Spätlese in the years that they've made it. Now, floating downstream back to Traben-Trarbach, the first plots that should catch our attention will be on the right in the side valley that wraps around the town of Trarbach. On the left side, as we look up, this valley is the Trabacher Schlossberg. Here, Vaiku farms just over half a hectare. They began farming this plot in 2016, though the first wines to have Schlossberg on the label are from 2018. This is a blue slate site with a west-southwest exposure, and this too they consider largely a product site, meaning it most often produces a Cabernet or a Spätlese. Now, on the other side of this valley sits a sneakily important site for Vaiku called the Trabacher Traubenhaus. At 0.7 hectares, this is their largest single holding in any one vineyard after the Ellergrube. It's a uniquely east-facing site with plenty of water. You can see the rich forest up behind the vineyard. It's also one of the coolest vineyards they farm. In fact, in 2020, they made some sparkling wines from the vineyard. Perhaps the Vaiku expert among you will think to yourself, why have I never seen a wine from Vaiku labeled Traubenhaus? When I asked Konstantin this, he laughed and said, "Good question." It more or less seems to come down to the fact that 1, the vineyard name is a bit unpleasant in German. It would translate to something like pigeon house. And 2, they use the vineyard in many different ways. So for the moment, having it remain a bit anonymous is beneficial. For example, this is the site from where the village-level Trabacher wine is sourced. Yet the site also produces a good amount of the grapes that are used in the very serious estate wine, the one with the blue owl label. Those of you who are prone to wasting away your days on this website, bless you all, may recognize these 2 sites from the Tenstedt Vineyard Tour. He too has worked both sites in the past and continues to work the Schlossberg. Now finally, floating further downstream, we come to the trio of Grand Crus that has made and solidified the reputation of Weiser-Künstler as one of Germany's truly elite estates. First, we come to the iron-rich Geiswad, a uniform yet very steep rectangle of vines 80-plus years old and largely ungrafted. Alexandra and Konstantin farm about 0.6 hectares in the site. Next, just downstream, the Ellergrube. This is one of the most dramatic sites in the Mosel, with angular terraces jutting out in different directions and ungrafted vines well over 100 years old. Vaiku farms around 1.8 hectares of this site. It is their largest holding, by far, yet the yields here are minuscule because of the age of the vines. The Ellegrube is one of the Mosel's most beautiful sites, yet the work here is so extreme and the yields so low that very few people would still want to work the site. What Constantine and Alexander do here is simply awe-inspiring. The photograph above on our grower page of Constantine and Alexander drinking coffee in the vineyard was taken at the Ellegrube hut, visible and marked toward the top of the vineyard. Finally, when we float down to the next village, Enkirch, we come to yet another side valley. And tucked into this valley, again with a southerly direction, is the Grand Cru Steffensberg. There's a bit more weathered slate here, a bit more soil and vigor. This site produces Weicu's most textural and rich Grand Cru, though we're talking about Weicu, so when I say rich, I still mean more lithe and nervy than nearly 90% of the other wines made in the Mosel. There is nothing Weicu does that isn't shocking in its clarity and finesse. You'll also note the small prime parcel within the Steffensberg known as In Löwenbaum, which they will bottle separately in many vintages. And that is the vineyard tour for Weicu, one of the Mosel's most serious and most cerebral estates. Now, go out there and drink some Weicu!